Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline. The Existential Crisis Hotline.
Hello everyone, I'm back, and guess what? I can now hear things in my headphones. I sorted out the issue. It was super weird because, like, obviously, you know, you can mute your computer, like on your keyboard or whatever, there's a mute button, but that wasn't the issue. And anyways, I was looking at it earlier today, and I went into like the sound settings in my Mac, and then from there I went to look at the different, you know, various output options. And the headphones option, when I clicked it, there was a checkbox that said mute, like it was permanently muted for some reason. It was so weird. I don't know why. I don't know how that happened. But anyways, that's why I couldn't listen to stuff on the stream last night. I just had to read. Speaking of reading, I got some books. I'll tell you a little bit about first before I get into some of the other stuff today. But I haven't started this one yet, although I kind of was scanning through it a little bit. And it's called Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher. And let me find the table of contents. Look at the first chapter. It says number 1. Dang, so much glare. I'll just read it to you. It says, the chapter 1 is called, "It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism." I was like, damn. Let's see. It says, after 1989, which I guess would be the fall of the Soviet Union, capitalism had presented itself as the only realistic political economic system. What effects has this capitalist realism had on work, culture, education, and mental health? Is it possible to imagine an alternative to capitalism that is not some throwback to discredited models of state control? That was pretty interesting. Like, communism doesn't work, right? So what else is there other than capitalism? So I don't know. I haven't read it yet, but this guy came up when I was looking into all the accelerationist stuff with Nick Land. And I don't know if he's technically an accelerationist, but his name kept coming up, so I thought I got this book and another one of his, which I'm going to get into myself at some other date, because I'm reading this right now. Anti-Oedipus, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. I'm reading this as my nonfiction. Well, I'm reading what is it? Closer Encounters by Jason Giorgiani. Although, you know, I've talked about this before, but like, I'll start reading something, I might take a break, read something else, come back to it. So it's just one of the books in my rotation on my nightstand. And anyway, so I just wanted, you know, it just looks so interesting, so I decided I'd read a little bit of this. I read through the introduction, and is it the first chapter, I suppose? Yeah, it's divided into like 4 sections with chapters in each one. So I read the first section of the first chapter, and it's very weird. It's very weird in a good way. But I was trying to find like something I could read to you as sort of like a quote, because I have okay. So just as a heads up, I want to talk about some of the data center stuff that's going on that I was reading about this morning, and then also there was this, okay, because, you know, there was this order by Trump to release files relating to UFOs and UAPs that happened like a week or two ago, I guess. And since then, they basically instructed the Department of Defense to prepare information that can be released, to be released, so nothing has been released yet, but it's like kind of building up to some kind of release of some information. And so while that's happening, all this other stuff is going on, and people are talking about UFOs more, UAPs, aliens, non-human intelligence. And when I got up today, there was all these stories about these pastors who, let me get rid of this, all these pastors, what is this? Oh, who basically are saying that they were part of some meetings with people in the know. Well, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I want to go through some of those, because I haven't watched any of these interviews yet or these discussions. I just read some of the descriptions. So that'll be something else we'll get into. But before we do, I want to talk about this book for a second. Okay. And then I have a little thing I want to play in reference to it. I was just trying to find something that would... Because, I mean, dude, if you read this, you'll know what I mean. It's hard to find a thing, a specific paragraph that kind of explains the point, because it's very... yes, I guess it's technically a philosophy book, I suppose. But, you know, it's like if you read... if you ever read, like, Jean-Paul Sartre, you know, to find a paragraph that exemplifies something is very difficult, because each sentence is so dense, and like the words don't mean what you think they mean, and it's like these guys wrote in a style that so that you couldn't understand it. Not like they didn't want you to understand, but they weren't trying to write in a way to make it easy to understand. It's almost, maybe poetic is the wrong word, but they're just kind of expressing stuff how they want to do it, whether you understand it or not, basically. So it's a little bit inscrutable. This isn't quite inscrutable, this particular book, but, you know, I'm reading through it, and I remember having this insight, and then as I'm going through it, I was like, what was it that I read that... oh, maybe I think I found it, actually. See, the problem is I didn't have my pen with me to, like, highlight anything. So it's called Anti-Oedipus, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. And I guess the reason there must be a lot more context I'm not aware of, but obviously Oedipus is a story that has persisted throughout time, and especially in Western civilization. It was a Greek myth, and maybe I should look at that, actually. Maybe I should look into... I mean, I kind of already know, but maybe for the sake of the stream... Hold on one second. Let me just pop it over here. Bam. And let me scale this or fit it. Let's see. For those of you who don't know the story, I remember we read the play Oedipus by Sophocles when I was in high school. All right. This is the article about the play. I don't really want... Oh, here we go. Here's just Oedipus generally. Okay. Oedipus means swollen foot. What's up, Gaitan? Put that there so you can see. I like the little dancing guy you got there. All right, so... Sorry, I have this tendency to like sit back in the chair, which makes me like way far away from the mic. Maybe I'll just put it over here a little bit so I can sit back. Does that sound okay? If it sounds good, you can say yes. If it doesn't, just keep your opinion to yourself. No one asked. Okay. So anyways, Oedipus, ancient Greek, means swollen foot, apparently. Mythical Greek king of Thebes. Sounds good. Okay, awesome. A tragic hero, Oedipus unwittingly fulfilled a prophecy that he would end up killing his father and marrying his mother, thereby bringing disaster to his city and family. That's the story. Oedipus, okay, so here's the Sophocles play. Apparently, according to Jason Giorgiani and his research, the first Greek tragedy that was performed was Oedipus. I'm assuming Sophocles. I'm not sure. Does it say that anywhere? Yeah, here it is. The play is thought to have been... oh, no. I don't know if it's the Sophocles one. Actually, no, I think it's not. I think it was the one by Aeschylus, which I have not read. Aeschylus. I mean, all these guys had their own versions, right? Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, that's what Jason Giorgiani said, that the Aeschylus version was like the first one they did. Maybe it was at some particular theater or something. Okay, so it represents two enduring themes of Greek myth and drama: the flawed nature of humanity and an individual's role in the course of destiny in a harsh universe. So those are very specific themes. So I think what's happened is throughout time, different artists, philosophers have taken the Oedipus story or aspects of it and used it as a symbol for things that they want to get across. But let's just see what it says. In the best known version of the myth, Oedipus was born to King Laius and Jocasta of Thebes. As the son of Laius, he bore the patronymic Laides. Hey, ladies. Laius wished to thwart the prophecy, so he sent a shepherd servant. Well, what's the prophecy? I didn't even say that. I mean, I said it up there, but... all right. So there was a prophecy. There was a prophecy that he was going to kill his dad, marry his mom, and bring shame and destruction to Thebes. So Laius, the king, heard about this prophecy, so he sent a shepherd servant to leave Oedipus to die on a mountainside. However, the shepherd took pity on the baby and passed him to another shepherd, who gave Oedipus to King Polybus and Queen Merope to raise as their own. Oedipus learned from the oracle at Delphi that the prophecy that he would end up killing his father and marrying his mother, but unaware of his true parentage, okay, because now he was being raised by other king and queen, he believed he was fated to murder Polybus and marry Merope, and so he left for Thebes. So he leaves. So he's like, well, I'm not going to do it. On his way, he met an older man. Isn't that how these stories always start? Who was unbeknownst to him, his father, and killed him in a quarrel. Oops. Look, dude, if there's a prophecy that you might kill your dad and you don't want to fulfill the prophecy, maybe just don't kill anybody. But hey, it was just some random guy. Continuing on to Thebes, he found that the king of the city had recently been killed. Well, what a coincidence. And that the city was at the mercy of the Sphinx. Oedipus answered the monster's riddle correctly, defeating it and winning the throne of the dead king, aka his actual dad, and the hand in marriage of the king's widow, who was also, unbeknownst to him, his mother, Jocasta. Oops. Years later, to end a plague on Thebes, Oedipus searched to find who had killed Laius and discovered that he himself was responsible. Jocasta, upon realizing that she had married her own son, hanged herself. Oedipus then seized 2 pins, like, needles, from her dress and blinded himself with them. So, oh, look, it's going to help me out here. Thanks for the layup, Wikipedia. The legend of Oedipus has been retold in many versions and was used by Sigmund Freud to name and give mythic precedent to the Oedipus complex, which we will look at momentarily, and will perhaps help to clarify why this book is called Anti-Oedipus, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. So here we go. What is the Oedipus complex according to Freud? A son's sexual attitude towards his mother and concomitant hostility toward his father. First formed during the phallic stage of psychosexual development. I mean, come on, guys. It didn't help that my mom was super hot. How could I do, come on. Shouldn't have said that out loud. A daughter's attitude of desire for her father and hostility toward her mother is referred to as the feminine Oedipus complex, which I think is called an Electra maybe that's a separate thing. Maybe that's some other version, or I don't know. I always thought that was called that. Electra complex. Yeah. Oh, I guess, but Jung is the one who came up with that name. I guess Freud just called it the female version. Sexist much. The general concept was considered by Sigmund Freud in the interpretation of dreams. Okay. Freud's ideas of castration anxiety and penis envy refer to the differences of the sexes in their experience of the Oedipus complex. Castration anxiety is an overwhelming fear of damage to or loss of the penis. The term can refer to the fear of emasculation in both a literal and metaphorical sense. Huh. Okay. All right then. I'm not zooming in on that picture. That looks like a weird picture. Not going to look at it. Penis envy. I don't know anything about it, so I have to look it up. Oh, literally not what I thought it was. A young girl's experience of anxiety upon realization that they do not have a penis. Freud considered this realization a defining moment in a series of transitions toward a mature female sexuality. Huh. Oh. The young boy's realization that women do not have a penis is thought to result in castration anxiety. Weird. Okay. All right. Moving on. The complex is thought to persist. So the Oedipus complex. It's thought to persist into adulthood as an unconscious psychic structure which can assist in social adaptation, but also the cause of neurosis. According to the sexual difference, a positive Oedipus complex refers to the child's sexual desire for the opposite sex parent and aversion to the same sex parent, while a negative Oedipus complex refers to the desire for the same sex parent and aversion to the opposite sex parent. Freud considered that the child's identification with the same sex parent is the socially acceptable outcome of the complex. Failure to move on from the compulsion to satisfy a basic desire and to reconcile with the same sex parent leads to neurosis. Okay. I could kind of see that, though. It's like, as a male, if you just always reject your father and you just always need your mommy, and you never really accept your father. I mean, I'm just speaking from the perspective of trying to understand this. Kind of makes sense, I guess. So I guess the Oedipus story kind of symbolically represents this, or maybe he just thought of these things and was like, that's kind of like Oedipus. I'll use that as an example. Freud rejected the Electra complex. Okay. Some critics have argued that Freud, by abandoning his earlier seduction theory, which attributed neurosis to childhood sexual abuse, and replacing it with the theory of the Oedipus complex, instigated a cover-up of sexual abuse of children. Interesting. Some scholars and psychologists have criticized the theory for being incapable of applying to same-sex parents as being incompatible with the widespread aversion to incest. Yeah, I can see why they would say that. But okay, well anyways. In the interpretation of... Okay, let me go back here. Freud also claims the play Hamlet has its roots in the same soil as Oedipus Rex, and the difference between the two plays are revealing. What does Hamlet have to do with that? Okay, I could see that. Because Claudius kills Hamlet's father. Because I was thinking, like, he doesn't kill his father. But he's, like, killing the guy because he killed his father. So I guess it kind of... Okay, anyways. In Oedipus Rex, the child's wishful fantasy that underlies it is brought into the open and realized as it would be in a dream. I mean, interesting. In Hamlet, it remains repressed. And just as in the case of a neurosis, we only learn from its existence from its inhibiting consequences. However, in the interpretation of dreams, Freud makes it clear that the primordial urges and fears that are his concern and the basis of the Oedipal complex are inherent in the myths the play is based on, not primarily in the play itself, which Freud refers to as a further modification of the legend. Before the Oedipus complex, Freud believed that childhood sexual trauma was the cause of neurosis. See if there's anything else. Interesting. So he describes what happens after a boy becomes first aware of prostitution. When after this, he can no longer maintain the doubt, which makes his parents an exception to the universal and odious norms of sexual activity, he tells himself with cynical logic that the difference between his mother and a whore is not, after all, so very great, since basically they do the same thing. If you're looking at the context of our society in terms of why most people get married, I understand. It's not really about love. It's a financial arrangement. The enlightening information is not based on principle, is my point. The enlightening information he has received has in fact awakened the memory traces of the impressions and wishes of his early infancy, and these have led to a reactivation in him of certain mental impulses. He begins to desire his mother herself in the sense with which he has recently become acquainted, and to hate his father anew as a rival who stands in the way of his wish. He comes, as we say, under the dominance of the Oedipus complex. He does not forgive his mother for having granted... all right. So I'm going to read a little bit more because it's going to give a little bit more context here. Despite the mother being the parent who primarily gratifies the child's desires, the child begins forming a discrete sexual identity, boy or girl, that alters the dynamics of the parent and child relationship. The parents become objects of infantile libidinal energy. The boy directs his libido, psychic energy, toward his mother and directs jealousy and emotional rivalry against his father. The boy's desire for his mother is concomitant with a desire for the death of his father and even an impulse to instigate that death. These desires manifest in the realm of the id, governed by the pleasure principle, which is to seek pleasure, avoid pain. But the pragmatic ego, governed by the reality principle, the ability of the mind to assess the reality of the external world and to act upon it accordingly, as opposed to the pleasure principle. The pragmatic ego, governed by the reality principle, knows that the father is an impossible rival to overcome, and the impulse is repressed. The boy's ambivalence about his father's place in the family is manifested as a fear of castration by the physically superior father. It's just making me think about circumcision for some reason. You know? Like, there's got to be something to that. The fear is an irrational subconscious manifestation of the infantile id. In both sexes, defense mechanisms provide transitory resolutions of the conflict between the drives of the id and the drives of the ego. Repression, the blocking of unacceptable ideas and impulses from the conscious mind, is the first defense mechanism. But its action does not resolve the id-ego conflict. It merely confines the impulse in the unconscious, where it continues to exert pressure in the direction of consciousness. The second defense mechanism is identification, in which the child adapts by incorporating into his or her superego the personality characteristics of the same-sex parent. In the case of the boy, this diminishes his castration anxiety because his likeness to his father protects him from the consequences of their rivalry. Little girl's anxiety is diminished with her identification with the mother, who understands that neither one of them possesses a penis and thus are not antagonists. What the fuck is this bullshit pop-up in the chat? Whatever. The satisfactory resolution of the Oedipus complex is considered important in developing the male infantile superego. By identifying with the father, the boy internalizes social morality, thereby potentially becoming a voluntary, self-regulating follower of societal rules rather than merely reflexively complying out of fear of punishment. Unresolved son-father competition for the psychosexual possession of the mother might result in a phallic stage fixation that leads to the boy becoming an aggressive, overambitious, and vain man. So, a little bit of context background on Freud and the Oedipus complex. So what does that have to do with this? I don't know. Let me find the... Oh, where was it? I had something I was looking at earlier. Hold on 1 second. I was looking at it earlier. I was like, oh, there's something. Oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah, okay. I'm going to read just a little bit of this because this is from the introduction, which is by one of the guys who translated this book from the original French. I think it was French. So I'm just going to read like maybe a couple pages real quick, just to the point that gives enough context to kind of so you can see where this is going. And there's a reason why I want to do this. I'm going to make a point about it in a moment when I play something else. Okay, it'll make sense in a moment. Dude, there's so much in this. It's crazy. Okay, but I have to focus. Schizoanalysis and collectivity. To be anti-Oedipal is to be anti-ego as well as anti-homo, meaning anti-human, anti-man. Willfully attacking all reductive psychoanalytic and political analyses that remain caught within the sphere of totality and unity in order to free the multiplicity of desire from the deadly neurotic and Oedipal yoke. For Oedipus is not a mere psychoanalytic construct, the authors explain. Oedipus is the figurehead of imperialism, colonization pursued by other means. It is the interior colony. And we shall see that even here at home, it is our intimate colonial education. This internalization of man by man, this Oedipalization, creates a new meaning for suffering, internal suffering, and a new tone for life, the depressive tone. Now depression does not just come about one fine day, Anti-Oedipus goes on, nor does Oedipus appear one day in the family and feel secure in remaining there. Depression and Oedipus are agencies of the state, agencies of paranoia, agencies of power, long before being delegated to the family. Oedipus is the figure of power as such, just as neurosis is the result of power on individuals. Oedipus is everywhere. For anti-Oedipalists, the ego, like Oedipus, is part of those things we must dismantle through the united assault of analytical and political forces. Oedipus is belief injected into the unconscious. It is what gives us faith as it robs us of power. It is what teaches us to desire our own repression. Everybody has been Oedipalized and neuroticized at home, at school, at work. Everybody wants to be a fascist. Deleuze and Guattari want to know how these beliefs succeed in taking hold of a body, thereby silencing the productive machines of the libido. And then, their whole discussion on machines is crazy because they don't just mean like, just metal mechanical machines. They mean like your body itself. There's a lot in context, but they also want to know how the opposite situation is brought about, where a body successfully wards off the effects of power. reversing the Freudian distinction between neurosis and psychosis that measures everything against the former. Anti-Oedipus concludes, the neurotic is the one on whom the Oedipal imprints take, whereas the psychotic is the one incapable of being Oedipalized, even and especially by psychoanalysis. So the neurotic is basically someone who accepts this repression, and the psychotic, okay, and you know, when you hear the word psychotic, you imagine like a serial killer or something. That's not what they mean. They mean the person who refuses to be psychoanalyzed, the person who refuses to repress, the person who the psychoanalyst would be like, you're beyond help, you know, like that kind of thing. They refuse to play by those rules. They're referring to that as the psychotic. Like, anyways, there's a lot of really cool stuff in here, but I don't want to like go on a whole thing about it. Okay, I'll do that when I feel like I need to. The first task of the revolutionary, they add, is to learn from the psychotic how to shake off the Oedipal yoke and the effects of power in order to initiate a radical politics of desire freed from all beliefs. Such a politics dissolves the mystifications of power through the kindling, on all levels, of anti-Oedipal forces, the schizo's flows. Forces that escape coding, scramble the codes, and flee in all directions. Orphans, no daddy, mommy, me. Atheists, no beliefs. And nomads, no habits, no territories. A schizoanalysis schizophrenizes in order to break the holds of power and institute research into a new collective subjectivity and a revolutionary healing of mankind. For we are sick, so sick, of ourselves. It is actually not accurate to say that Deleuze and Guattari developed the schizoanalytic approach, for, as they show, it has always been at work in writers like Miller or Nietzsche or Artaud. I don't know how to say that. I know I have French people listening. Well, I guess you can't really tell me because you're in a chat, but how would you pronounce that name? Artaud. I mean, I should have known that. How do you pronounce... What is it? Deleuze. Oh, I think that's what I was saying. All right, I just want to make sure I was saying it correctly. Stoned thinking based on intensely lived experiences, pop philosophy. To put it simply as does Miller, everybody becomes a healer the moment he forgets about himself. And Miller continues, reality is here and now, everywhere, gleaming through every reflection that meets the eye. Everybody is a neurotic, down to the last man and woman. The healer, or the analyst if you like, is only a super neurotic. To be cured, we must rise from our graves and throw off the cerements of the dead. Nobody can do it for another. It is a private affair which is best done collectively. Once we forget about our egos, a non-neurotic form of politics becomes possible, where singularity and collectivity are no longer at odds with each other, and where collective expressions of desires are possible. Such a politics does not seek to regiment individuals according to a totalitarian system of norms, but to denormalize and to de-individualize through a multiplicity of new collective arrangements against power. Its goal is the transformation of human relationships in a struggle against power, and it urges militant groups as well as lone individuals to analyze and fight against the effects of power that subjugate them. Quote, for a revolutionary group at the pre-conscious level remains a subjugated group, even in seizing power, as long as this power refers to itself refers to a form of force that continues to enslave and crush desiring production, which is a term they explain in the book. A subject group, on the contrary, is a group... Oh, that's interesting. Okay. A subject group, on the contrary, is a group whose libidinal investments are themselves revolutionary. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually. If you think about... And that's always been my criticism of, like, revolution. It just ends up being another group getting into power. Something tastes weird about that tea. I don't know what it is. It's got kind of a weird... almost sour flavor. Maybe the milk's kind of sour. Whatever. Yeah, so like revolutionary groups, like communism, they revolt and they get into power, and it just becomes another oppressive system. For a revolutionary group at the pre-conscious level remains a subjugated group, even in seizing power, as long as this power itself refers to a form of force that continues to enslave and crush desiring production. And then, by contrast, a subject group, it's like subject-group. A subject group, on the contrary, is a group whose libidinal investments are themselves revolutionary. It causes desire to penetrate into the social field and subordinates the socius or the forms of power to desiring production. Productive of desire and a desire that produces, the subject group always invents mortal formations that exercise the effusion in it of a death instinct. It opposes real coefficients of transversality to the symbolic determinations of subjugation, coefficients without a hierarchy or a group superego. There can be no revolutionary actions, Anti-Oedipus concludes, where the relations between people and groups are relations of exclusion and segregation. Groups must multiply and connect in ever new ways, freeing up territorialities for the construction of new social arrangements. Theory must therefore be conceived of as a toolbox, producing tools that work. Or, as Ivan Illich says, we must learn to construct tools for conviviality through the use of counterfoil research. When Illich speaks of convivial reconstruction, he is very close to Deleuze and Guattari's notion of a desiring revolution. Like Deleuze and Guattari, Illich also calls for a radical reversal of the relationships between individuals and tools or machines. This reversal would permit the evolution of a lifestyle and of a political system which would give priority to the protection, the maximum use, and the enjoyment of the one resource that is almost equally distributed among all people: personal energy under personal control. I mean, that seems so damn close to just saying, like, life within a person. All three authors agree that such a reversal must be governed by a collective political process and not by professionals and experts. Dude, like, it's just so close to some of the things we've talked about for a while, at least in terms of how I'm interpreting it. The ultimate answer to neurotic dependencies on professionals is mutual self-care. And then I think I'm just going to read this next little paragraph. Freed from a psychoanalytic framework, the political group or collective cannot, however, push aside the problem of desire, nor can it leave desire in the hands of new experts. It must analyze the function of desire in itself and in the groups in which it is involved. What is the function of desire, Anti-Oedipus asks, if not one of making connections? It's like, as I'm rereading it, things that I read later are making more sense. For to be bogged down in arrangements from which escape is possible is to be neurotic. For to be bogged down in arrangements from which escape is possible is to be neurotic, seeing an irresolvable crisis where alternatives in fact exist. Wow. Wow. Maybe I'll just read this paragraph too. It looks interesting. It says, man, it's just really good. The politics of desire would see loneliness and depression as the first things to go. Such is the anti-Oedipal strategy. If man is connected to the machines of the universe, if he is in tune with his desires, if he is anchored, he ceases to worry about the fitness of things, about the behavior of his fellow men, about right or wrong and justice and injustice. If his roots are in the current of life, he will float on the surface like a lotus and he will blossom and give forth fruit. The life that's in him will manifest itself in growth, and growth is an endless, eternal process. The process is everything. It is this process of desiring production that Anti-Oedipus sets out to analyze. For if desire is repressed in a society, Deleuze and Guattari state, then it is hardly because, quote, it is a desire for the mother or for the death of the father. On the contrary, desire becomes that only because it is repressed. It takes that mask on under the reign of the repression that models the mask for it and plasters it on its face. The real danger is elsewhere. If desire is repressed, it is because every position of desire, no matter how small, is capable of calling into question the established order of a society. Not that desire is asocial, on the contrary, but it is explosive. There is no desiring machine capable of being assembled without demolishing entire social sectors. And then they have this word desiring machine. The problem is they don't always define everything very, directly. So sometimes it's like you have to figure out what they're talking about. Let me see if they actually define that in this. I mean, when I say they don't define it, I just don't mean they don't give you the one word, the one sentence definition. It's like they use an entire chapter to define the concept. Yeah, okay, well, I could keep going on and on and on. But I just wanted to point out, because this sort of anti-Freudian, anti-psychoanalytic idea, okay? So take that point. It's about capitalism and schizophrenia. A few streams back, we were talking about Nick Land. And they kept bringing up this book. That's how I found it. See, look, is Nick Land taken seriously? Oh, let me go back. Is Nick Land taken seriously at all as a reader of Deleuze and Guattari? If not, is there anything he gets wrong in his understanding of them? To answer your question, I don't think anyone who described themselves as a serious reader of Deleuze and Guattari would say they take Land seriously. However, if you read D&G's project as a way of philosophizing that was concerned with the creation of concepts, with experimentation, with the endless machinic production, then I would argue that Land's work is one of the only meaningful projects that has tried to continue the work of D&G, not just interpret, compare, or apply it. His cult essays like Circuitries and Meltdown are, for me, the kinds of things that I might have expected to see D&G writing as the impact of the internet on the collective unconscious became more widely visible. They are schizophrenic productions. Brazier was right to call his work mad black delusionism. In that regard, even if he did have some kind of breakdown that led to neo-reactionarism, I think is what it's called, and the Dark Enlightenment stuff, I still encourage people to read those essays. Okay. So, my point there, I mean, I didn't see this before, but my point there was just to make the connection. See, look, it said it right here. Nick Land. Look, Land resigned from Warwick, which was the university he was at, in 1998. After a period of amphetamine abuse, he suffered a breakdown in the 2000s. But I mean, look at the title: Capitalism and Schizophrenia, right? So, look, there's Mark Fisher. Oh, it's one of Land's students. Okay, that's the connection there. Where do they talk about Deleuze and Guattari? Did I just skip it? Here we go, right here. During this era, Land drew inspiration from the post-structuralist theory and leftist thinkers like Bataille, Marx, and Deleuze and Guattari, as well as science fiction and so forth. So he was drawing ideas from these guys. Okay? And I'm not so much saying that to prove a point here, but just to show you like there's a connection between things, right? Things influence others. That's relevant because when we looked the other night and we read through the Techno-Optimist Manifesto from Andreesen Horowitz, he specifically mentioned Nick Land by name in the document and then later again listed him as one of the patron saints of techno-optimism. And so, although I don't have a specific point I'm trying to make, I'm just trying to show you how, I'm just trying to connect some dots. Because this, because when we were reading the techno-optimist stuff, and I'm like, okay, this guy's clearly been influenced by Nick Land, who was influenced by Deleuze and Guattari. And Nick Land, at least the stuff I've read of his, is kind of like, we're basically at the mercy of capitalism. And capitalism is essentially AI. AI is capitalism. Capitalism is an information processing system. And Nick Land, in his schizophrenic writings, was basically saying that, you know, artificial intelligence as an entire entity, so to speak, even though it's a distributed entity, already exists in the future and is reaching back in the past and influencing our history to get us to create it, basically. And that once we create it, it doesn't really have any regard for humanity whatsoever, necessarily. Now, that's not what Andreesen's saying, but I don't see how you go from reading Nick Land to suddenly being like, oh, it's going to be great for us, unless there's some kind of dissembling, you know, like some kind of attempt to like conceal something or maybe not present the whole picture. But I mean, even if I go back in here when it says, they go much further than Lang on this point. It says, like Lang, they encourage mankind to take a journey, the journey through ego loss. They go much further than Lang on this point, however. They urge mankind to strip itself of all anthropomorphic and all anthropological armoring, all myth and tragedy, and all existentialism, in order to perceive what is non-human in man, his will and his forces, his transformations and mutations. The human and social sciences have accustomed us to see the figure of man behind every social event, just as Christianity taught us to see the eye of the Lord looking down upon us. Such forms of knowledge project an image of reality at the expense of reality itself. They talk figures and icons and signs, but fail to perceive forces and flows. They bind us to other realities, and especially the reality of power as it subjugates us. Their function is to tame, and the result is the fabrication of docile and obedient subjects. So it's like arguing that almost like humanism itself is actually sort of a subversive way of controlling everybody. And so if you assume that that's true, that if you assume I'm accurately representing the point, then if I look at someone like Marc Andreesen, assuming he's studied Land, which it seems like he has, which is influenced by this, and maybe he was influenced by this too, or maybe he just was influenced by Nick Land, his version of this stuff. I don't know. I can't say for sure he's read this, but I'm going to play a clip in a moment from Marc Andreesen, which will make you see why I was like, dude, has he read this too? It'll make sense in a moment. And again, maybe he hasn't. Maybe he just read Nick Land and other stuff. I don't know what the guy's read. I don't know him. But the stuff he's going to say in the video, I think giving all that context, it'll make sense what I'm trying to connect here. Because it's like this idea that the left, the progressives, right, the political left, is always trying to utilize the point of they care about humanity and people and so forth. And that's why we have to, you know, make the system in a way where it cares for everybody and takes care of them. But it's sort of like a manipulation of everybody's desire to have a better life, perhaps for the purpose of just political control. It's like they're lying, right? And I think that's probably, I'm assuming, someone like Andreesen's perspective. Because when you look at other things he's said, he's basically like, you know, same thing with Peter Thiel. It's like all the regulation, the political correctness, all the leftist type politics it ultimately like holds everybody back. Now their idea, I think, is just to like unleash capitalism all the way, which doesn't really make sense when you consider that these guys were like calling a lot of that into question. I mean, I haven't read the whole book, so I can't really comment specifically, but they seem very leftist, but not leftist necessarily in the same sense as like a progressive Democrat is. They seem like even more fundamentally leftist in that sense, I suppose. Let me go here real quick, just see if we can get some more context. Here's a Wikipedia on that book. A 2-volume work consisting of Anti-Oedipus and 1,000 Plateaus, called Capitalism and Schizophrenia, was an influential success, and with its critique of psychoanalytic conformity, marked a significant step in the evolution of post-structuralism, which we'll look up in a second. Its emphasis on the nomadic nature of knowledge and identity, as seen, for example, in the author's stress on the continuities between the human and the animal, also places it among the formative texts of postmodernism. Stark and Laurie argue that Anti-Oedipus also responded to the failures of Marxist revolutionary movements to purge themselves of the vices they were seeking to overthrow, including prejudice, dogmatism, nationalism, and hierarchies of power. What was that? Not really like a lot else on there, I suppose. What I'm trying to figure out, because I'm trying to understand how like the people who are really creating a lot of shit in our world and directing a lot of this AI stuff, how they think and what it is they're actually thinking. And what I'm trying to understand is, do they actually believe that... Okay, because again, that was the point I was trying to make. Like, they're very like, we got to move beyond any sort of anthropomorphizing, right? Move beyond these ideas of like the specialness of humanity. But when you read the Techno-Optimist Manifesto, it's like, this is pro-human. This is the best thing humans can do for humanity. And I'm like, does he really buy into that? Like, I wonder if that's just like rhetoric. Because then when you go and you read Nick Land, it's like you get this feeling of like he sees the AI as just like a machine that does not care about humanity. Reality isn't defined by humanity. Reality is a information processing system, essentially, that will define itself however it sees fit. And humans are just a part of that process. Like, almost like the idea of evolution in itself. Like, they're just a step in the evolutionary process to something else, right? And all of that fits in really well to transhumanism, right? Because that's the idea, is you're going to go beyond just being a normal human to something else. But the way Nick Land, at least his early stuff, because I haven't really looked at much of his later stuff, if there is anything, it's very, like, pessimistic, Like, humanity is just irrelevant in the whole point. So, okay, so that's enough context. Let me find that interview. I just want you to hear this part. Right, we played this on like one of the podcasts, maybe. I don't think I played it on the stream before, but just this little bit here. Okay, the interviewer's gonna ask him a question. That's Marc Andreesen, who, just for more context again, Marc Andreesen, American businessman, venture capitalist, former software engineer. He created Netscape. Oh, it says it right there. He's co-author of Mosaic, the first web browser to display inline images. Co-founder and general partner of Silicon Valley venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. Let's see. Did they talk about what they... Andreessen Horowitz made first 2 investments in 2009, one in business management SaaS developer Aptio and one in Skype. Okta, American Identity and Access Management Company. I don't know much about it. Becoming first. Okay, so they invested $80 million in Twitter. And they held stock in Facebook, Groupon, Twitter, and Zynga. What was Zynga? Video game? I think they do like apps and stuff. He also invested in Airbnb, Foursquare, Stripe. Okay. Coinbase, Lyft, Oculus, Soylent. That meal replacement thing. BuzzFeed. Samsara. Medium? Wow. Let's see what else. Lots of stuff. Substack. Roblox. Figma. Clubhouse, I remember that. I wonder whatever happened with Clubhouse. What else? Kickstarter. What else? Anything else I recognize? WeWork. No, Flow, which was created by a WeWork guy. Invested in XAI. So, I'm just showing you, like, they're not like nobodies, obviously. They're pretty well involved there with all of that. So I just want you to hear what he says.
A little bit on the caffeine.
You said something that I love and I never hear other entrepreneurs talk about, but I think it's super important, that you don't have any levels of introspection.
Yes, zero, as little as possible.
Why?
Move forward, go. Yeah, I don't know. I found people who dwell on the past get stuck in the past. It's a real problem, and it's a problem at work and it's a problem at home.
So I've read obviously 400, I think now 10 biographies of history-based entrepreneurs,
Yep.
And that was one of the most surprising things. Like, what's the most surprising thing that you've learned from this? So like, oh, they have little or zero introspection.
Yep.
Like Sam Walton didn't wake up thinking about his internal self. He just woke up. He's like, I like building Walmart. I'm going to keep building Walmart. I'm going to make more Walmarts, and just kept doing it over and over again.
And you probably know, if you go back, like 400 years ago, it never would have occurred to anybody to be introspective. Like, it's the whole idea of, all of the modern conceptions around introspection and therapy and all the things that kind of result from that are, kind of manufactured in the 1910s, 1920s.
Say more about that.
Great men of history didn't sit around doing this stuff at any prior point, right? It's all a new construct. It was so first Western civilization had to kind of invent the concept of the individual, right? Which was like a new concept, several hundred years ago. And then, for a long time, it was, all right, the individual runs, right, and like does all these things and builds things and builds empires and builds companies and builds technology, does all these things, and then kind of this kind of guilt-based whammy kind of showed up from Europe, a lot of it from Vienna in the 1910s, 1920s, Freud and all that entire movement, and kind of turned all that inward and basically said, okay, now we need to basically second guess the individual. We need to criticize the individual. The individual needs to self-criticize. Right. The individual needs to feel guilt, needs to look backwards, needs to, dwell on the past. It never resonated with me.
Do you find a lot of the greatest founders that you've spent time with and backed and partnered with or have low introspection?
Yeah, generally. Although, in fairness, the introspection is probably linked to the personality trait of neuroticism, right? So, a lot of the best founders are, I think.
You see that? Like, okay. Oops, I didn't mean to do that.
Case study of that. Having said that, I always kind of wonder, is that, well, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations. Impact strikes me a little bit as an extrinsic motivation. It's like impact, money, fame. And by the way, I think extrinsic motivations are fantastic, and I think they can be very motivating. The people who get the great rewards for building great things, deserve them. But at least what I found is it's the intrinsic motivations that actually get people up in the morning. And there's where you're dangerously close to straying into introspection. But it's like, okay, like what is the thing that causes somebody who's now extremely materially wealthy, extremely successful, to get up in the morning and continue to, kind of punch away at the world. I think those tend to be interior.
What's that for you?
Oh, that would require introspection. I'll let other people speculate.
No, you have to.
It's a lot more fun to speculate about other people's introspection.
But I am curious about you, because like you have a series of quotes that I absolutely love. I save on my phone. I reread from time to time. One of them, and I'll butcher it, but it's just like, the world is way more malleable than you think. And if you just pursue something with a lot of maximum effort, drive, and energy, the world will recalibrate around you easier than you think. Yeah. And I actually reread that this morning before I came over here, and I was like, What is that for Mark? Like today, like what are you waking up trying to change in the world?
Yeah, there's a lot that we're actually trying to do. I'm suspicious that that's my actual underlying motivation.
Why?
Just because, like I said, I don't think external impact is enough to keep people going. Or at least I've seen way too many people who had a high level of external impact and then at some point they just stop.
Okay.
Well, here's the problem with external impact. It's like, okay, it's 4 a.m. You're staring at the ceiling. Like, is that enough? Right? Like, external impact is stuff that's happening to other people, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, all right, what is it about you? The story I like to tell myself is that I'm competing with myself, right? The story I like to tell myself is I'm getting up in the morning because I'm trying to become a better version of myself. I'm trying to become, smarter and better informed, and have reach better conclusions, and be better at what I do, and continue to expand my skills. But again, to actually analyze that properly require a level of therapy that I'm not willing to engage in. So anyway, so yes, the much more comfortable conversation is what are you trying to do in the world, which I would love to talk about.
I have almost no introspection either, so
Yes.
I understand
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because, I remember when I talked about this before, probably on a podcast, I was like, that's like a psychopathic sort of mindset. But at the same time, there's a lot of validity in what he's saying. Like dwelling on your past and being neurotic and second guessing yourself. I think the issue, though, is I think the bigger issue is not that introspection is a bad thing to do. It's that psychoanalysis is not an actual internal process. It's an external thing being applied to you to keep you in line with a certain structure of reality, right? And so I think I'm just, musing here, but I think maybe from Marc Andreesen's perspective, that's all totally inhibitory, which it is. Like, therapists are not there to help you become the best version of you. That's not what they're there to do. They're there as like policemen of the system to keep you in line. That's the point. But at the same time, I think that the idea that you don't need to question your own motivations is not being honest about reality itself. It's like not really looking at the whole picture. So I think he still has a very limited perspective of what is real. And he could say, well, fuck you. What do you know? Look at everything I do in the world. I get that. But I mean, fucking like they're investing in Roblox, and it's like, you've seen all the shit that's gone on with Roblox, I'm sure. Well, maybe you haven't, but go look into it. All these social media companies that are just designed to get people addicted so they can have users, so, even that point where he's like, well, if I start looking at my internal motivations and so forth and going into it, that would require a lot of introspection and therapy and so forth, right? So it's like not at all questioning your motivations. And it's kind of like, it kind of shows like, look, I have this programming. I'm just going to push it to the limit. I'm not going to question the outcome. And it's unfortunate. I'm not going to question like, what is the consequence of it, because you have people like that who know how to get shit done in this world. They know how to move things. Like you said, if you just, that point you said about the world recalibrating around you was quite interesting. Let me see if I can find it. That quote he said.
The thing that was driving them to be a great, you just, be.
Okay.
Well, here's the problem with external impact. It's like, okay, what it should be.
And I get what he says about external impact. It's like you can only motivate yourself so much to do something for the world. It has to be relevant to you as well. Like, you can't just be like, I'm going to change the world. Like, you still have to get up every day. And so that external motivation, it's not that it's not relevant, but I think also the problem with that is no one ever clearly defines what that means. And that's why it's not particularly motivating. There's an external motivation of I'm going to impact the world versus what's your internal motivations. Why can't they be in total alignment is my question. Why can't they be in total alignment with each other? I'm going to push myself to be the best version of myself, and I'll know I'm doing it because the world will be the best version of itself. And if I'm not impacting the world in that way, then how can I say I've really changed? Right? So yeah, I just thought it was interesting because he's like, you could just get up, do things. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say on that. But yeah, as I'm listening to him, I'm like, okay, because I remember watching this a while back. This was what, a month and a half ago when that came out, and I remember talking about Freud and all that stuff, and I just thought that was interesting, those perspectives. And then as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, maybe he didn't read this book. Maybe these ideas are out there floating around in other contexts, and maybe that's how he was exposed to it. But I do think it's interesting that this is connected to Nick Land, which he has very obviously had some contact with. Okay, so I just wanted to share some of that. I don't have anything final to say about it, but I thought it was kind of cool. All right, and here's John Lennon, since we were talking about the Beatles last night.
I think all our society is run by insane people for insane objectives.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I sussed when I was 16 and 12 way down the line, but I expressed it differently all through my life. It's the same thing I'm expressing all the time, but now I can put it into that sentence that I think we're being run by maniacs for maniacal ends, If anybody can put on paper what our government and the American government, etc., and the Russian, Chinese, what they are actually trying to do, and what they think they're doing, I'd be very pleased to know what they think they're doing. I think they're all insane, but I'm liable to be put away as insane for expressing that. That's what's insane about it.
Yeah.
I mean, don't you agree? I think...
Interesting, right? What does it mean to be insane in an insane world? I found this earlier. NVIDIA and Pulte Group. Pulte is they build homes, and I forget the guy's first name. John Pulte, I think. He owns or runs Pulte Group, and he's the secretary of Housing and Urban Development, I believe. I don't know if he still is, but he was recently. Trump put him in there. He was a huge Trump supporter. I actually used to follow him. They're partnering with Spain to install in-home mini data centers. Yeah, that's a good point, Gaetan. It said self-interest only. It's like the point of... Like, I agree with Andreesen on the point of like just dwelling on your past and feeling bad about it and being depressed and neurotic and shit and feeling like you need to go to therapy all the time. Like, fucking get over it, change it, forgive it, let it go, move on. But to move on, when you look at the world and it's all fucking insane and you have no real principled purpose within it and you don't have the programming that Marc Andreesen has, what do you fucking do? Right? So the way we approach reality should also include everybody who doesn't have that programming, right? What if everybody had that programming? I mean, from the perspective of being able to move and mold reality and do all that stuff, like have the vocabulary to do that, man, we could do a lot of really cool stuff, but then you'd come into conflict, wouldn't you? I mean, it's like, it's like a self-defeating point, because to say you shouldn't introspect, but then call into question the motivations of leftists or progressives. Oh, well, they're trying to slow us down. So it's like, okay, so you are applying some kind of standard, some kind of moral standard here, or is it just because they're trying to slow you down? Like, it kind of reminds me of Marquis de Sade, where it's like, look, there are no rules. You can do whatever you want. Nothing is against the laws of nature because nature is destructive. So you can do whatever you want. But at the same time, other people are going to try to stop you. So if you can get yourself into a position where you can use the police and the military to protect you and oppress other people, go for it. Fuck it. Like, that's kind of the attitude, right? It's sadistic, actually. So, sadistic in that sense. right? But then so then even the point of like claiming, well, look what the Chinese are doing, we can't let them win. It's like, so you want them to introspect on their motivations, but that can just be like sort of a game theory thing, you know? It's like, well, they don't have to either. But if I can manipulate everybody to stop them so I can win, then it's all's fair, right? Anyways, let me go back here. So yeah, this is pretty crazy, right? In-home mini data centers, 16 Blackwell GPUs, 4 AMD EPYC CPUs, and 3 terabytes of RAM. Holy shit. Powered by unused household electricity for AI inference. That's insane. So when I was looking at this morning, I saw that their city council, whatever, there was some meeting in the Panhandle in Texas. The people in the city or the town or the county or whatever were opposing the building of like a 5,000 acre data center, which for the Europeans or people in Canada, that's 20 square kilometers. And then as I'm looking at that, I find this. Kevin O'Leary, I don't know if it's only him. He's probably got a bunch of investors. They're planning a massive data center that was approved by the county commission in Utah, 40,000 acres, which would, I think it's like 120 square kilometers or 64 square miles. 2.5 times the size of Manhattan. It's like apparently the size of Washington, D.C. That's crazy. Like, what's that for? That's not for ChatGPT. What's that for? All right, so moving on. Actually, we never looked at this post-structuralism thing. I'm going to do that another time, though. Okay. Oh, yeah, Kevin O'Leary was all about... What was that crypto thing? Sam Bankman-Fried? FTX. He was like a big spokesperson for FTX. Okay, so I got a bunch of these kind of stories. I'm going to start with the representative Anna Paulina Luna. Her name is Luna. Come on, guys. The moon? Really? So let's see what she says.
So the interdimensional beings is what our witnesses will call these things. I have seen evidence in a skiff that leads me to believe there are things we cannot explain, and I have observed things that are of non-human origin and creation. That's my opinion. Again, but there has been a declassification order from the president. And
you know, actually, if you think about it, starting with this point we were talking about, with like going beyond this idea of humanity as some important thing, then you're introducing the idea of non-human intelligence. So it kind of makes you feel like, oh, humanity is not the end all be all. There's more, like we're just like nothing really, kind of like the idea of God. But these techno people, the tech guys, the AI guys, they just believe like God doesn't already exist. It, like, instead of God existing in the past and everything being the unfoldment of God's plan over time, and history is sort of the unfoldment of God's plan for redemption, it's more like God exists in the future and has been influencing humanity and nature this whole time to build God.
you will see as soon as that stuff comes up.
Right. So do you think that the American public's going to be super surprised when this comes out, or is it going to be a bit of a nothing burger?
Well, I don't think it'll be a nothing burger, but, you know, we're not going to tell the American people what to make of it. But I think, you know,
Sure.
when, again, you saw my last hearing that I did with the task force where there was some footage that was entered into the archive, and it was pretty shocking for people. I don't know much tech that can deflect a Hellfire missile. I don't know about you. But, you know, I think
So
that's
what do
the
you
type of
think?
footage that you'll see.
So what do you know, if you had to just make a decision now about whether there really were I guess, aliens moving among us with their strange machines that have all sorts of powers. Do you think that's plausible?
I don't call them aliens, and I don't know what these things are that they're using, right? But I think that there's stuff that we have witnessed as members of Congress, been briefed on that we cannot explain. And I will leave it at that because that's going to be coming out soon. And I think that the American people will have many of their questions answered. But, you know, there's stuff declassified years ago out of the Pentagon. Multiple videos, Tic Tacs, I think Tucker
She said Tic Tacs, which is a specific term for a type of UFO.
Carlson family actually had shown one of the videos. It looked like a pyramid that was flying around. And, you know, people see it, they're like, yep, we knew it, and then they move on. So I don't think that, you know, the Earth is going to stop moving. But I think that for a lot of people that are paying attention, it's just confirmation of kind of something that we already suspect.
I think a lot of people aren't aware of the 2021 congressional hearings on the UAPs. I don't think they're aware of it. Hold on one second. Had to send a fly to heaven. Okay, so then now all of this stuff has been going on today. Yeah, Tic Tac, it's like they're Tic Tac shaped UFOs basically. They just called them Tic Tacs because of the shape of them. Okay, so then all these pastors, this was like flooding my feed today. All these Christian pastors are saying this same story, so I'm just going to play a few examples, okay?
Joseph Z. and myself.
Oh, that's 40 minutes long. Okay, let me start with something else.
Fellow pastors are invited to come to a private meeting.
Let me start
fellow
over.
pastors are invited to come to a
He
private.
starts talking really fast. Sorry. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to play it. Ready, go.
Fellow pastors are invited to come to a private meeting with a group of men who are connected with the intelligence world that are believers, but are still have very high security clearance. These are legit, true men of God that are still connected to Washington and even this current administration and all branches of military. And they literally told us, we had a sitting congressman, a very well-known congressman from Missouri. He called into that meeting as well. That was just for pastors. And this is what he said. On speakerphone, this sitting powerful member of Congress said, "Are the pastors listening to me?" I'm getting chills right now because this happened to me. He said, "Are the pastors in the room listening to me?" And I said, "Yes, sir, we are here." And he said, "Listen to me. Go and tell the church they are not ready for what is coming. The narrative that is coming, what they are going to say is going to be like nothing you can even imagine. They are preparing to tell us that they are from another dimension, that they are our creator, and that these beings, these aliens, or whatever you want to call them, they were the ones that seeded us here. There is no such thing as God. Jesus was invented by them. The Bible was invented by them." And begin to just say, listen, prepare the people for what is coming because they're not ready. But he loved us so much. He made sure that he told us exactly the blueprint to study. He said, study the days of Noah. And if you can understand how Noah responded, that's how you're going to have to respond. And I believe what God is doing in the body of Christ right now.
So that's interesting. That's okay. Let me go on to another one first. Here's another one.
Eric Davis has been involved in the intelligence community since the 80s, right? So he's
for a long time.
For a long time, and he first worked for Bigelow Aerospace, and then he.
Actually, let me come back to that. That's that representative. Here's another one of those pastors.
But this is going to be a really important conversation.
Yes, thank you, Bishop Allen. And Tony, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. I was here till about midnight last night at the studio. My son woke me up at 3 o'clock this morning. I've been up since, so I should have just stayed here all night.
Well, there's so many things going on. We, the three of us, and a few others, just a handful of people, were pulled into a meeting, and we really got data and information that not all of it can we talk about because there's an investigation going on higher ranks of issues. And so we'll talk about the things that we can and should talk about, but we're going to give a lot today. And so what I'd like to do is Bishop Allen, if you could just start with us, my friend, and just begin to talk about what you're understanding and some of the takeaways you have. And then, Tony, I'd like you to respond to that. Let's begin.
Well, I've got to say this was one of the most unusual meetings I've ever been a part of, where the three of us, along with maybe three others, it seems like a half a dozen people were gathered in an Airbnb in the mountains of Tennessee, discussing an investigation that's going on in the United States government against crimes they have committed in the process of retrieving and reverse engineering technology from non-human intelligence. The meeting also went forward to discuss the propaganda plan that was in place leading up to disclosure. And so it was interesting that as we were preparing for this meeting, I think, Tony, was it 2 weeks before we actually had the meeting, you reached out to us and said something about this.
Yes.
As we were getting ready, the urgency of the meeting was there's about to be disclosure. We need to have a conversation with key ministers who have a big reach and a big influence so that the body of Christ is not unprepared and is not back on their heels when this information comes out. So the interesting thing about the timing of this meeting is, as we were gathering, we saw Obama come out, we saw Trump come out, and then we saw more statements that we're going to talk about here in the future. So that's kind of the gist of the meeting. There was a lot that we'll talk about and unpack here in this conversation, but it was truly one of the most unusual meetings I've ever been a part of.
It really was. Tony, you really were part of the catalyst to get us going in some of these spaces. Can you give us a summary?
Yeah, so you're welcome for having the most unusual meeting you've ever had.
We blame Tony.
Hey, blame the podcaster. So, so long story short, I came in contact with these guys more than a year ago now, and I've been in touch with them, communicating with them, and their heart is to prepare the body of Christ for what's coming. These guys are part of, let's just say, they're Christians in intelligence operations, and they are specifically geared towards trying to, initially it was to gather evidence and data on what's actually going on behind the scenes within the disclosure community, and that's made of many different camps. And they have gathered a lot of data, and I remember when I was introduced to them, I got some phone numbers, and we set up a phone call, and I think there was 3 guys on the call, including myself before, and we spent probably about 2 hours on a call discussing what they've come up with and what they believe to be going on with disclosure.
Yeah, and I agree with that comment that it's obvious they are just propagandists who can speak the language. Like, it really feels like they're like sending out these people to, like, I mean, prepare the body of Christ, or in other words, to set something up, right? And again, just as a reminder, Disclosure Day is set to release June 12th, so basically a month from now, right? Is that right? May, June, July, yeah. 1 month from now. What a weird timing. What a weird coincidence. So let's see. This is, I guess, that representative that they were referring to, him talking on, it looks like Timcast or something.
Eric Davis has been involved in the intelligence community since the 80s, right? So he's
for a long time.
For a long time, and he first worked for Bigelow Aerospace, and then he went on to get work for the Pentagon, and then CIA, and basically researching what they describe as crashed material, retrieved crashed material.
And he was saying definitively, they know of 4 alien species. Like, he's saying they're real.
Right. Now, whenever I pressed him and asked him, at least in that setting, he did not say that he personally has seen these, right? But he described the 4 different types of aliens, the Greys, the Nordics, the Insectoids, and the Reptilians, that are commonly referred to in the UFO community. They would not just blend into the population.
No.
And that's, at least, and I'm not saying I believe it. I'm just saying that's what I've been told.
What if they're just people from the future?
I think that's an interesting thought experiment, right? That what we're experiencing are future.
Hey, you guys heard it here first. That's what we've been talking about. I'm just bringing in all the shit everyone's talking about. So you're not caught off guard by all this stuff, right? That's all it is.
Future generations of humans who have mastered time travel, and if you master time travel today,
okay, when we talked about it before with Jason Giorgiani and all that, it sounds a little fringe, but you've got a fucking U.S. congressman talking about, he's not saying he knows it's true, but still, like, the fact that he's just talking about it. Like, can you imagine, like, in the 1990s, a U.S. congressman saying stuff like that? They would have immediately shunned him, even if he was just saying it, like, as a speculation type of thing. Like, it's just, it's crazy. It's crazy. And I really think that, the thing I'm not certain about is there going to be a disclosure event where they push a specific narrative, or is it like there's going to be some information released that's not very specific, and then because all these different narratives have been put out there, people will run with it, and it's like they don't have to necessarily have an official narrative that it's like the government says humans are alien intelligence is from another dimension and God and Jesus aren't real. Or is it just going to be different points in the media are going to run with these ideas and just try to like push it on people and impulse people with it? But I feel like the Christians resisting it, they're going to feel empowered, like, oh, this is the end times. You know, like now they're revealing these points because we're getting close. So it like puts them in that mode of like, it's like a war footing.
Hey, wouldn't you want to go back and see what was going on in
well, you'd have
history? I would.
You'd have to.
I'd want to. I'd want to go back and see, hey, I want to see what the Pharaoh really looked like.
Okay,
I want to see what
confounds me though, as someone who's not just a skeptic, but someone who just straight up doesn't believe in aliens. If that were true, would the powers that be in the intelligence agencies really just come right out and talk about it so openly?
They don't, though.
Well, we just heard that.
Well, this guy's former, isn't he?
Well, no, I mean,
you're never former intelligence.
Well, I mean, what's happened is we've had 2 hearings now, and we've had whistleblowers come forth, like David Grush, and they have forced the conversation into the public arena. They forced the conversation. Then you have guys like Congressman Burleson and his.
It's a fair point because it's not like the government officially is coming out and doing this. It's like being forced. But at the same time, that could also be a government plan. So you can't really just assume what this guy right now is saying is a fact. It could just be a narrative, you know? Like, remember when we were watching that video of that guy, Dan Sherman, talking about that project he was a part of where he was communicating with an alien, but he never saw it. And somebody was like, maybe they were just telling him it was an alien so he would believe he could communicate, but it was really just some kind of telepathy technology they were developing or who knows what. And also, if he ever went and blabbed about it, people would just think he was crazy because he's talking to an alien, you know, or it could have been disinformation on purpose to make Russia or whoever think that we're communicating with aliens. I don't know. You just can't know based on, a perfect example of this is like the recent military operation with Iran, where it's like every other day they're changing the story as to why it happened and what's going on. And you just really don't know what's the real point behind any of it. It's like constant fog of war, basically.
Colleagues who are fighting for disclosure. Without that battle, without that effort, you wouldn't be hearing about any of this. You wouldn't have these guys coming forward. You wouldn't have Eric Davis coming forward and making these declarations. I wouldn't necessarily call it a declaration. He was answering your question. But this is a new environment. We're in a new space now, post hearings, post UAP hearings, and so
I think
5 years ago I would have agreed with you, but that's just not the case anymore.
I think the reason they don't say it is because, just put it this way, how would you feel if you woke up and realized you were in a rat cage your whole life and everything you knew was just some stupid rat experiment for somebody,
Probably how I felt when I was 22. Probably like that.
Like when we look at rats in a cage in a lab, we pity them. What if everything you've ever done in your life, everything you hoped for, your dreams, you woke up tomorrow and you knew was completely meaningless? the research you've done, the religion you held, everything was just totally nonsense.
So that you're living in a simulation.
You mean what would happen if everybody woke up and had an existential crisis? Well, good thing there's an existential crisis hotline. And if you're having an existential crisis and you want help with that, and when I say help with it, you want me to accelerate it for you, then send me a message on X or on Facebook, and I can do that. Just go down the rabbit hole. You know, if you're going down the rabbit hole, at a certain point, you can't turn around. You just got to keep going through. If you wake up and realize everything you thought was the purpose of your life and everything is meaningless, what would you do? Well, you know what I would do? I would try to figure out what's the actual fucking meaning. I wouldn't just be like, well, oh well, no meaning. I wouldn't become a nihilist. Well, meaning's just what I make it. Sure, but that doesn't answer the question. Meaning was already what you were making it the whole time, but now you realize all that was bullshit. Why don't you just hold on to that meaning? Well, because it's not true anymore. Okay, so whatever meaning you decide to come up with, how do you know if that's right? You got to have some kind of standard to see, like, is this real or not? Whatever meaning I'm giving to things, is it a real, stable meaning? Is it eternally real and possible? Is it going to produce a consequence that's best for everybody so it doesn't constantly implode back on itself? Let's see what else real quick. Maybe I'll just watch a little bit of this and see. I don't know if it's interesting or not. I haven't listened to it. I just saw it as one of the little guys that was talking. Let me just see real quick. Oh, look, here's David Grush. Let me just see if there's anything. Oh, look. 44 minutes ago, Annalena Lena. Seeing a lot of stuff circulating on the internet that is misquoting Representative Burleson. He'll be putting out a statement clarifying and debunking all of this soon. It's really unfortunate to see people trying to spin stuff for clicks, fear-mongering, or in some cases straight up lying. Interesting. Very interesting. Looks like he hasn't put up a statement yet. Translation, Joshua T. Charles has been right about everything, and every dispensationalist evangelical you know is about to get one-shotted by the Antichrist. What is dispensationalism again? I always get it mixed up. Oh, yeah, the whole Israel plan thing. Okay, let me go back. Let me see if there's anything else. UFO phenomenon. It's like my whole feed now. It's like, oh, you like UFOs? You want to hear more about it? I think we saw that guy, right? We watched this one? Yeah, we watched that guy. Mini data centers. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to watch a little bit of this and then we'll just see if that's interesting or not.
Joseph Z. and myself were lured into a meeting at an undisclosed location where we were forced to turn our phones on airplane mode and hear from those who are working within the intelligence agencies and investigating them what's going down. I'm going to be sharing little pieces of that, not everything, but little pieces of that. Me and Joseph Z. are going to come together later and do more. And Obama.
This was the guy from that other one we watched. It's just the longer one. Okay. All right, well, I think we heard the points on that. Let's see what this post-structuralism thing, I feel like it might be relevant. A philosophical movement that questions the objectivity or stability of the various interpretive structures that are posited by structuralism and considers them to be constituted by broader systems of power. Okay. Common themes include rejection of the self-sufficiency of structuralism. Well, what the hell is structuralism? An intellectual current and approach, primarily in the social sciences, that interprets elements of human culture by way of their relationship to a broader system. It works to uncover structural patterns that underlie all things that humans do, think, perceive, and feel. What's the problem with it then? Language and society as systems of relations. Okay. I hate these terms because they don't really... Oh, here we go. It actually talks about it further. As well as an interrogation of the binary oppositions that constitute its structures. Accordingly, post-structuralism discards the idea of interpreting media or the world within pre-established socially constructed structures. Structuralism proposes that human culture can be understood by means of a structure that is modeled on language. As a result, there is a concrete reality on the one hand, abstract ideas about reality on the other hand, and a third order that mediates between the two. A post-structuralist response then might suggest that in order to build meaning out of such an interpretation, one must falsely assume that the definitions of these signs are both valid and fixed, that the author employing structuralist theory is somehow above and apart from these structures they are describing so as to be able to wholly appreciate them. The rigidity and tendency to categorize intimations of universal truths found in structuralist thinking is a common target of post-structuralist thought. Oh, look. Deleuze. Post-structuralism. Well, maybe I'll just read this part. Structuralism, as an intellectual movement in France, studied underlying structures in cultural products such as texts, and used analytical concepts from linguistics, psychology, and anthropology and other fields to interpret these structures. Structuralism posits the concept of binary opposition. Yeah, obviously like male, female. It says it right there. In which frequently used pairs of opposite but related words or concepts are often arranged in a hierarchy. For example, Enlightenment versus Romanticism. Structuralism, post-structuralism. Male, female, speech, writing, rational, emotional, signified, signifier, symbolic, imaginary, east, west. Post-structuralism rejects the structuralist notion that the dominant word in a pair is dependent on its subservient counterpart, and instead argues that founding knowledge on either pure experience or on systematic structures is impossible. Because history and culture actually condition the study of underlying structures. That's a fair point. And these are subject to biases and misinterpretations. Okay, I can see that. Like, you're going to divide everything into certain ideas, and say everything is based on these structures, but you're not realizing that even you looking at it that way is part of the structure, and you're not able to objectively look at it. Deleuze and others saw this impossibility not as a failure or loss, but rather as a cause for celebration and liberation. A post-structuralist approach argues that to understand an object, a text for example, one must study both the object itself and the systems of knowledge that produced the object. Makes sense. It really does make sense, because when I'm looking at all these different things, it's like, okay, but what was influencing that? What was the ideas at the time, right? The uncertain boundaries between structuralism and post-structuralism become further blurred by the fact that scholars rarely label themselves as post-structuralists. There's a whole list of people. Semiotics is a study of signs. Well, I'm not going to go into all that right now. Okay, let's see if there's anything else before we go tonight. Now tell the pastors to start talking about aliens. Yeah, exactly. Looks like we're going to be doing COVID, but with aliens this time. In the space today, Alan Didio Says he attended the U.S. UFO disclosure pastor, and the year 2027 was discussed in relation to aliens and UFO disclosure. Well, we got to get the Steven Spielberg movie out first before we really disclose anything. Let's see what he says in here.
Okay, one last question for you. When you were in these meetings, did they mention the year 2027?
Yeah, they sure did. They mentioned that date in particular as being a key moment, and they went into details. We should do a separate podcast. I need to get my notes together. Maybe get some of these guys who were in the meeting with me together and kind of go over specifically 2027. But awesome. That there was something, and the urgency of the meeting was that there was something was going to be disclosed very, very quickly. So yeah, they did point to that, and they went over a lot of details with that. But the main focus was what's coming this year.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so something's coming this year apparently, and then something else going to happen in 2027. Claims are exploding online that U.S. government has been holding secret meetings with pastors. My pastor just got back from some big meeting. He looked shook. Started crying at the pulpit. Saw him out back earlier, burning Bibles and yelling something about lizards and loosh. Okay. Check this out.
In the news, you're seeing a lot of that talk about demons and other things like that. You know, the Vice President Vance has mentioned that. My friend, Tucker Carlson has also said that too. And I've had private conversations with him about that. And I do want to address that really quickly, both as an intel officer, a guy who studied physics, a practicing Roman Catholic like Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance. I respect those views of spirituality and demonic deception, and I think we should be concerned about that. But I think it's theologically premature without knowing everything, equating everything to demons, because God has created this wonderful, visible and invisible order. He's created humans, animals, angels, and other types of non-human intelligence. And I don't think us as humans, we understand all of God's creation to kind of use a theological kind of framework on that. And I think that everybody needs to keep that in mind, to be respectful of that. And the Catholic Church certainly has a long history in this. And there are Catholic theologians like the late Dr. Paul Thigpen, Dr. Diana Pasulka at University of North Carolina, Dr. Brent Robinson at Notre Dame. They've provided a lot of that analysis and theological interpretation on how people can view this. So I see that as a big impasse, certainly because of the commentary that I'm hearing about that kind of thing. It's very dangerous language, and I think we need to be more thoughtful about that. And I'm just happy I'm able to plug.
This is the guy who made the documentary called Age Disclosure. Marc Andreesen, reasonable centrism in 2026. You are not, Alexander Dugin, right, says, you are not the people. You are stupid slaves on the Epstein's menu of cruel cannibal elites. You are eaten. Your brains are. It is why you watch Euphoria. Because all of you are perverts. I mean, fair enough, dude. If you're watching Euphoria, you're a pervert. Disgusting civilization, no reason to exist. Please die. Jesus. Reasonable centrism in 2026. Funny. Former NSF program director, Dr. Anna Brady Estevez. In conversation with Ross Coulthart, says she is 95% certain multiple non-human species are here interacting with us on Earth. Can you imagine being David Icke and being like, you motherfuckers, like, I've been telling you about reptilians and all this shit for 20 years, and you guys acted like I was an asshole, crazy person, and now you're all just talking about like it's no big deal. She emphasizes humility, ambiguity, and respect. You need to be empathetic towards the aliens, guys. This is the one I was looking for earlier. I was going to play. I must have clicked off of it. Here, let me do this one. I don't think we did
that
this.
They actually look more human with reptilian skin, but humanoid. They're hybrids. They mixed it in a lab. Come on now. Okay, so it's not from another planet. And they don't even look like you think they look. So who's in charge of that? So this is the things that I've never talked about before. I probably never will again, but thank you for coming. But this is the thing that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the book of Revelation. These things are going to come out of the earth. They didn't come on spaceships. These are interdimensional beings. And those who have enough sodium pentothal in their system, when I ask them, will tell me the truth, no matter what agency they work for. They will tell me the truth, and that is they're interdimensional. They're not coming from far away. They're coming from below your house. And they're waiting for a certain time to come up on the earth. And God's not letting them be exposed yet.
It's so interesting because I remember like years ago trying to explain to people like, well, aliens don't have to be physically from another planet. They could be like sort of interdimensional. And it was like so hard for people to even grasp that. And now it's just like people are just randomly talking about it everywhere now. It's so wild. It's just part of the burden of being ahead of your time, I suppose. Sandro, oh, that you're in reference to Katie's comment. Yeah, totally, right?
That they actually look more human.
Look at this post from the White House. Cinco de Ported. Adios. This guy always posts shit like this. There's no coming back. Like, say your prayers. This might be your last day on earth. Like, all right, dude. Every day you're saying that. Let's see what else. Oh, Sneeko says you are going to die. Well, yeah, no shit, dude. Okay. Jesus at the center. Yeah, guys, isn't it great how they're praising Jesus at the Met Gala? Oh, yeah, Jesus and Jesus with the cross. Jesus. Praise Jesus. Well, give me the statement, damn it. I need to know. What is he gonna say? Oh, we already saw all that. Okay. Katy Perry asks, what is real? Katy Perry wants to know what is real, guys. Somebody send her this live stream. Let's see what he says.
So now if you go and say, well, listen, David, you clearly know what you're talking about in certain areas, but maybe you've gone astray. Maybe you've just misinterpreted some well-intentioned people. The reason I bring this up is because we have Sean Kirkpatrick, we have Representative Mike Turner, and we have Susan Goff, who's a Pentagon spokesperson. All three of them say, what are you talking about? We have no idea. There's no such thing. So these are people who have come out and basically, to one degree or another, and probably very carefully worded, denials, a non-denial denial, but
okay.
they're saying no.
Whatever. It's like everybody on my feed is talking about it. What a coincidence. The Democrats. You want to see the comments? Let's look at the comments. First one's Dan Bilzerian. All right, anyways. Damn. $1 billion in taxpayer money into ICE funding bill to pay for the ballroom. Crazy. All right, David Icke, let's see what he says, and then we'll leave it at that.
What I would say to people is the research methodology of uncovering all this stuff that has turned out to be correct was the same methodology that I employed to come to the conclusion that behind all this is a non-human force.
I remember Bernard wrote something on the Destiny forum about David Icke, saying that when they explored everything, he had the most highly developed higher self in like existence, and that he was being fed information to put out. Because when you look at his solution, it's always about love. Higher consciousness, love. The existence of aliens changes nothing about the gospel or the Bible. Okay. All right. I'm going to leave it at that tonight, guys. That was interesting. And I will see you again tomorrow night, 8:30 p.m. I'm going to read some more of this tonight. Might read some of this tonight. And oh man, I'm really close to being done with what is it? Damon by Daniel Suarez. 10 out of 10 recommend. Katie was right. It's good, man. Like, I can't tell you how good it is without spoiling it, but you'll see what I mean. Especially when you get towards the end, it's like, holy shit, dude. And really makes you think a lot more about all the AI stuff. And, hey, by the way, Kate, I don't know if you're still listening, but I ordered another Daniel Suarez book. I was looking online. There's another one that we don't have, so... Actually, I think maybe two more. At least one more. Maybe two more. Anyways, I like to use my live stream to tell my wife about the books I ordered, so you're welcome, guys. And check out the new OAE song on OAE Records playlist. It's on the OAE channel on YouTube and at OAE Verse. I like it. It's pretty good. That's using the newest Suno model. It's like crazy how intricate and complex that the music is. Anyways, see you guys tomorrow night, and who knows, maybe we'll wake up tomorrow and everybody will believe in aliens. You never know. Have a good night, everybody. See you tomorrow.